So we are looking at the reproductive system. And when we talk about the reproductive system, we are going to discuss female reproductive system, and also we are going to discuss the female reproductive system and the male reproductive system. So we are going to discuss both of them. So when you talk about the female reproductive system, we are going to start with the female reproductive system. Female reproductive system. What makes up the female reproductive system? So the female reproductive system is made up of the following. So we can write down. One, we have the vagina. So made up of the following. One is the vagina, also called the birth canal. So we can also call it the birth canal. The second, we have the uterus, also called womb. Uterus or the womb. Third, we have the cervix, and the cervix is the lower part of the uterus. And number 4, we have two ovaries. And number 5, two ovaries. And then we have the oviduct. So we agreed that oviduct connects the ovary to the uterus, So meaning that it's also, the oviduct is also called the fallopian tube. It's also called the fallopian tube. So what happens is that we agreed that it's always good to reflect on what we have studied, and consequently, let's see whether we can be able to state the 5 components of, or what makes up the female reproductive system, from the vagina, also called the birth canal, to the uterus, also called the womb, to the cervix, and the cervix, we said it's the lower part of the uterus, to the 2 ovaries, and then oviduct, also called the fallopian tube. So we can look at it, we can have a look at the female reproductive system. We can have a look at the female reproductive system so that we discuss it. So it looks like this. One, we have the oviduct. We say the oviduct is the one that connects there. You can see, let's first of all look at the ovary. This is the one that produces the ova. Now, once the ova are produced, they travel through the oviduct, also called the fallopian tube, they travel to the uterus, also called the womb. And then we have so you can see the oviduct is also called the fallopian tube. We say the uterus is also called the womb. We've also said we have the ovary. You can also see we have the cervix. And we say the cervix is the lower part of the uterus. It opens up during the birth. And then we have the vagina, also called the birth canal, So you can see those 5 components that we have the ovaries, so they produce the ova. Those ovaries travel through the fallopian tube, also called the oviduct, to the womb or the uterus, and then a child develops, the young one develops, the baby develops. Upon birth, the fetus will come out through the cervix, then to the vagina. So those are the 5 components of the female reproductive system. So we can start with the ovaries, and we discuss the ovaries. What's the ovary? So let's discuss the ovaries. So they produce the ova. They produce ovum. They produce ovum. This is ova is plural. Singular is ovum. Singular is ovum. Singular is ovum. So that's the function of the ovaries, that they produce the ovum. This process is called ovulation and takes place every 28 days. So production of ova, so this process is called ovulation. This process is called ovulation. This process is called ovulation and occurs every 28 days. It occurs every 28 days. It occurs every 28 days. So it occurs every 28 days. So that is ovulation occurs every 28 days. So the function of the ovaries is to produce the ova, and this occurs every 28 days. Then we look at the oviduct. We look at the oviduct. What's the function of the oviduct? Also called the fallopian tube. Also called the fallopian tube. So we've said that it is the tube through which the ova will travel to the womb. So we can write that fertilization takes place in the oviduct. It connects the uterus and the ovary. So fertilization takes place here. Fertilization takes place at the oviduct. We also note that, so fertilization takes place at the oviduct. It connects the ovaries to the uterus. The ovaries to the uterus. So meaning that fertilization will occur in the fallopian tube, also called the oviduct. And also the fallopian tube is the one that connects. It is the one that connects the ovaries to the uterus. So that's the function of the oviduct. Then we have the uterus, also called the womb. Uterus, also called the womb. And it's the uterus or the womb. This is where the womb develops. The womb. This is where the fetus develops. So upon fertilization, fertilization is where the sperm from the male will meet with the ova from the female, and fertilization occurs. So what develops upon the sperm meeting with the ova, fertilization occurs. And the product of that is what we are calling the fetus. So the fetus now grows in the womb. It grows in the womb, also called the uterus. Also called the uterus. So also, implantation occurs in the womb. Implantation occurs in the womb. Implantation occurs in the womb. And what is implantation? Implantation is attachment. Is attachment of the zygote. And implantation is attachment. Implantation is the attachment of the zygote to the walls of the uterus. To the walls of the uterus. To the walls of the uterus. Is the attachment of the zygote to the walls of the uterus. So that is where implantation will occur. So meaning that the function of the uterus or the womb is that it is where the fetus will develop, and also implantation occurs in the uterus. And the implantation, we've said, is the attachment of the zygote to the uterus. That fetus attaches itself. So at that point, it becomes the zygote. It attaches itself to the walls of the uterus. Then we move on to look at the next, and that is the cervix. The cervix, and we described the cervix. Cervix is the lower part. It's the lower part of. It's the lower part of the. Or it's the lower part of the uterus. It's the lower part of the uterus. It is the lower part of the uterus, and it is very important. It opens up during the, when a child is being born, it's the one that it allows it opens during birth. It opens during birth. It opens during birth. Then the next component of the female reproductive, so that is the next component is there. So we've been able to look at the next is the vagina. And the vagina, it's the tube through which the baby passes during birth. It is, so vagina, or the birth canal. We can see it's the canal through which then it is the canal through which the baby passes during birth. The baby passes during birth. So we've been able to understand the components of the female reproductive system. Let's repeat. We started with the ovaries, and the ovary produces the ova in plural, the ovum in singular. And now, upon producing the ova, fertilization now will occur in the fallopian tube. That's the next component of the female reproductive system. And the fallopian tube is also called the oviduct. And then we move to the uterus or the womb, and the baby develops in the uterus or the womb. That's also where the implantation occurs. And we said implantation is the attachment of the zygote to the walls of the uterus. And then we have the cervix, and the cervix it opens during birth. It opens during birth, meaning that it's the one to hold the baby before birth. And then we have the vagina or the birth canal, and it's the canal through which the baby passes during birth. So those are the components of the female reproductive system. Those are the components of the female reproductive system. We can move on to look at the components of the male reproductive system. We move on to look at the components of the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system. So we discuss the components of the male reproductive system. The male reproductive system. And when we talk about the male reproductive system, we are going to be discussing the testes, scrotum. So these are the components. We have the testes. We have the scrotum. We have the sperm duct. We have the sperm duct. We have the glands. We have the urethra. We have the penis. And we have those components. So we are going to look at the diagram showing the components of the male reproductive system. We're going to look at the diagram showing the components of the male reproductive system. So when it comes to the male reproductive system, you can see the male reproductive system. We are going to discuss them. And we are going to start. You can see the testes. You can see these testes, the two balls. they are the ones that produce sperms. So these balls, these testes, the function is to produce sperms. Then we have the scrotum. Now the scrotum is this one. The testes are held inside this. They are held inside the scrotum. So it protects, it holds the scrotum. The function of the scrotum is to hold the testes. And then we have the sperm duct. You can see from these testes, there is a tube, there is a duct. There is a duct. So meaning the sperm duct carries the sperms from the testes to the urethra. You can see the urethra. So the sperm duct will be carried up to the urethra. Then we have the glands. We have the glands. And the glands, you can see the glands being held here, the glands in black. And the function of the gland is to produce a fluid called semen. It produces a fluid called semen when mixed with the sperms. So semen enables swimming of sperms. So that semen will enable swimming of sperms. And then we have the urethra, and the urethra carries both semen and urine. And then the penis, during sex, penis is the one that will deposit the sperms to the vagina, so that now the sperms will now travel to the fallopian tube, where they will meet with the ovaries for fertilization to occur. So those are the components of the male reproductive system. So we are going to discuss each of them. So we've talked about the testes, and we said testes produces sperms. We can just note, produces sperms. Then we've said scrotum holds the testes. Then we have the sperm duct, carries sperms from the testes to urethra, carries sperms from testes to urethra. Then we have the glands, and we said produces fluid called semen, that enables swimming of sperms, that facilitates swimming of sperms. Then we have urethra. It's the passage, it provides the passage through which semen and urine passes, the passage through which semen and urine passes. And then we have the penis, deposits sperms into the vagina, And then the sixth one is epididymis, stores sperms. We have the 7, epididymis, and the function is to store sperms. Store sperms. So we can now try to reflect. I said one of the methods of mastery of content, one of the methods in which we're able to master content is to self-reflect. Without looking at that content, can we be able to know the parts of the male reproductive system? And we started with the testes, and we said the testes produces sperms. We also have the epididymis, which stores the sperms. So once the testes produces those sperms, they are stored in the epididymis. Now, there is this bag that is holding these testes. And that bag, those two bags, that bag is called scrotum. So once the sperms are produced, they travel or they move through the sperm duct. And then the next component is the glands, and the glands produce semen, and the semen enables the swimming of the sperms. And then we have the urethra, and the urethra is the one that facilitates the movement of the passage of urine and the sperms. And then after the urethra, we have the penis. And the penis is the one that will deposit the sperms to the vagina. So those are the components. So you have those 7 components. From the testis, the scrotum, epididymis, then the sperm duct, the glands, the penis, and the urethra. Those are the components of the male reproductive system. Those are the components of the male reproductive system. Yeah. So what you'll find that during the stages of human development, there is a time that comes when there are very key physical changes, and during these changes, we call those changes occur during adolescence. So we need to understand adolescence. And when we talk about adolescence, is that it is the stage, it is the stage of human development, when there are very key physical changes in boys and girls. For instance, you'll find that a boy is talking in a very deep voice. So that is during adolescence. So it occurs between 12 and 19 years. It occurs between 12 and 19 years. So let's look at the physical changes during adolescence. Physical changes during adolescence. So let's see, what are those physical changes that will occur during adolescence? Let's understand the physical changes that will occur in girls and the physical changes that will occur in boys. So one is that in girls, increase in weight and height. Increase in weight and height. That's one of the changes that will occur in girls. Number 2 is hips broaden. That's why you find them with huge hips. Hips broaden due to hormonal changes. Their hips broaden. 3, hair grows under the armpits and on pubic area. Hair grows under the armpits, hook this way, under the armpits and pubic area. So that's another change that will occur in girls. And then menstruation. You know what is menstruation? And then pimples may appear. And then breasts enlarge. Enlarged breasts. So that's what occurs in girls. So we've said hips broaden, the girl weight and height increases, menstruation occurs. Then you'll also find that in girls, she has pimples, and then breasts are enlarged. Then in boys, what happens in boys when they are in that adolescent stage? The same thing, increased weight and height, increased weight and height, increased weight and height. That's one. Number 2 is that chests broaden. And number 3 is that beards grow. And number 4 is that hair on the chest, armpits and pubic area. And then number 4 is that wet dreams. Wet dreams. Wet dreams. And then number 5, pimples. We can talk pimples and deep voice. Deep voice. So this is the adolescent stage in men. So there is pimples, there is deep voice, there is the increased weight and height, wet dreams, among others in men, in males. So those are some of the changes that will occur. Then you'll find that there are also emotional changes. We've talked about physical changes. We also need to understand the emotional changes in both men and female, in both boys and girls. Emotional changes in both boys and girls. So shyness. And why are they shy? So girls are shy about the enlarged breasts, whereas men are shy about their deep voice. So boys are shy about deep voice, while girls are shy of the enlarged breasts. So that's one. Number 2 is that embarrassment. Why? So we are told that girls are embarrassed. Girls are embarrassed of menstruation, whereas boys are embarrassed of wet dreams. So that's another one. They may also get embarrassed, so worry due to pimples. Note that we said due to pimples. Both of males and females, they get pimples. They have pimples, and therefore that's a cause for worry. So moods change due to hormonal changes, due to release of hormones. So you said those are the emotional changes, that there is shyness, there is embarrassment, there is worry, and there is also mood change. So those are some of the emotional changes that occur in both boys and girls during adolescence. So what we've studied, let's do some practice questions. We are going to look at some practice questions to see whether we've been able to understand the content. So that we are going to do several questions so that we see whether we've been able to understand the content. And I may be forced to display this book so that we can do those questions together. We do those questions together. So we're going to do the practice questions to see whether we've been able to understand the male and the female reproductive system. So, name 4 parts found in the female reproductive system and state their functions. Name 4 parts found in the female reproductive system, state their functions, and when we talk about the female reproductive system, talked about the ovaries, and we say the ovaries are the ones that produces the ova. We've also said upon production of the ova, fertilization will occur. The second part is the oviduct, also called the fallopian tube, and it is the tube through which fertilization will occur, and then it also connects the uterus to the ovary. We've also said we have the uterus, also called the womb, and this is where the fetus will develop. We also said it is where the implantation will occur, and we said implantation is the attachment of the zygote to the uterus. Then the other one is the cervix, and it opens during birth. And then finally we have the vagina, and the vagina also called the birth canal. It's the vagina or the birth canal is the tube through which the baby passes during birth. It is also in the vagina where the sperms are deposited. So the second question, name 4 parts found in the male reproductive system, state their functions. And the answers we have already discussed. We've talked about the testes, it produces sperms. Scrotum, it holds the testes. The sperm duct carries the sperms from the testes. Glands, it produces the semen. And then you have the urethra, where it provides the passage for both the semen and the urine. And the penis, it is the one that deposits sperms into the vagina. And we also talked about the epididymis, which stores the sperms. Then the other question, we are taught to define the 2 terms. One, we are taught to define the term adolescent. Adolescent is a person between 12 years and 19 years. And this is a person between 12 years and 19 years where key human changes occur. Then adolescence is the stage. Then the tube that connects the ovary to the uterus is called the tube that connects the ovary to the uterus is called the fallopian tube. So the answer is C, also called the oviduct, fallopian tube or the oviduct. So then we move to the next questions. The next question, question 6. Question 6. We are told sperms pass to the outside of the penis. Sperms pass to the outside of the penis through so they pass to the outside of the penis through so meaning they have already moved outside the penis. So they will therefore move through the birth canal. So they are deposited to the birth canal. And then question 7, the ovary releases eggs every 28 days. That is a month. So the answer is B. And then we are told to draw arrows to match the reproductive parts to their function. For instance, now when we draw the testes, what's the function of the testes? Testes producing sperm, so we put it there. So we draw the arrow pointing the producing sperms. Sperm duct is the one that will allow passage of sperms to the urethra. So we put the arrow to the allowing passage of the sperms to the urethra. Then we have the oviduct. You remember the oviduct is also called the fallopian tube. It's the one that will allow eggs to move from the ovary to the uterus. And then we have the glands, and the glands reproduces fluid called semen. It produces, so you put the arrow, producing fluids called semen. Then changes that affect the feelings and behavior of an adolescent, the behavior, the feelings. So meaning that emotional changes are the ones that will change your behavior. For instance, mood swing, you become worried, you become embarrassed, you are shy. So those changes are called emotional changes. With the physical changes, they are visible. You can see them. But emotional changes, they will change the behavior and the feelings. And then name 4 physical changes that takes place in girls during adolescence. So what takes the physical changes that takes place in girls during adolescence? And we said the physical changes that will occur in girls during adolescence. We talked about the enlarged breasts. We also talked about the menstruation. We also talked about the hips. The there is increased hips. There is increased hips. Also, there is occurrence, the pimples. There is pimples. And we also talked about growth of hair in the pubic and the armpits. So those are some of the changes that we have been able to discuss. So this brings us to the end of the subtopic, the reproductive system. The reproductive system. Thank you.